I don't know, man. There's some crazy stuff going on. Crazy stuff. And speaking of crazy, we got Ian Sams. They're still chauffeuring out Ian Sams. The guy that looks like a thumb. Kamala intern Ian Sams. That's so funny. Refuses to distance their campaign from their top surrogate, Mark Cuban. So they're like doubling down on this guy. What I could say, and I don't like it, what I could say is Donald Trump and his campaign are distancing themselves from Tony Hinchcliffe. Trump's like, I don't know who the guy is. Everybody knows who Tony Hinchcliffe was. At least if you're in the comedy world. He's like the number one comedian in terms of roasting, and he's the number one podcast for comedy. Give me a break. So here's Ian Sams, the thumb, the White House counsel, a liar.
And is that an unforced error, talking about women on the other side of the aisle like that, this close to Election Day? And does the campaign agree with what Mark Cuban just said?
Well, my understanding is he tweeted to sort of clarify his comments. But the vice president's been very clear. She said this just yesterday, that she certainly disagrees strongly with insulting anybody over who they support, whether they support her, whether they support President Trump. She strongly disagrees with insulting people based on who they vote for.
Ian, is that?
Did you all catch that at the end?
Over who they support, whether they support her, whether they support President Trump. She strongly disagrees with insulting people based on who they vote for. She strongly disagrees with insulting people based on who they vote for. She strongly disagrees with insulting people based on who they vote for. She strongly disagrees with insulting people based on who they vote for.
Folks, I know you know this. Today's November 1st. Just this week, we were all being called Nazis, garbage. Just this week alone. Not to mention, for 4 years, you were a threat to this country. You were an extremist, a threat to democracy. You were basically deemed a terrorist in your own country. Now, I know I always keep saying this, we got a lot of new viewers. We're still booming and growing as a channel. Folks, if you're a Trump supporter, you're ever in the military, or you're a religious person, those three, according to Joe Biden's DHS advisory board, you are deemed a terror risk in your own country. And they're going to lecture us. And that wasn't the end of it. Ian Sams, the same guy, blames scheduling for Kamala Harris's refusal to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. Now, I thought JD was going to be on today. He was actually on yesterday. So I only got through like an hour and a half of that podcast, and JD's freaking great. Rogan, I'll tell you something about Joe Rogan, because I listen to a ton of his podcasts when I go running. Rogan was eating him up. Not in a bad way. Like, he was enjoying it, Rogan. And I'll tell you how I know. Joe Rogan hates when people interrupt one another on a podcast. So say like I'm talking and somebody's on with me and then they keep interrupting me. He hates that stuff. You know when Joe Rogan's having a really good time and actually enjoying a conversation, when he starts interrupting the person that's the guest. And he does that with JD Vance quite a bit, and not in a bad way. Just like that's what you do with your friends, right? You're excited about the conversation. You want to keep it going, and you're just having a good time, and you're kind of get caught up to where you just interject on them. And I think he was really enjoying his time with JD. I'm going to see what the follow-ups are of his other guests, because I'm usually they ask about it. Hey, how was your time with JD? Like, what was it like? Give us a little bit of behind the scenes. I think he had a really good time with JD Vance yesterday.
Joe Rogan has said that the campaign contacted him too, and that they wanted Joe Rogan to travel to where Kamala Harris was campaigning versus Harris travel to Austin as Trump did. Firstly, is that accurate? And if it's true, why not just travel to Austin and go do that interview with Joe Rogan? Is it a missed opportunity to make inroads with particularly young white male voters?
Well, yeah, we've had good conversations with Joe Rogan and his team about a potential interview between the vice president and him. I'm not sure whether it'll work out scheduling wise in this campaign.
Joe Rogan has said.
They keep saying that. They said that when she wouldn't do any interviews for like the first 2 months, right? She hadn't done any interviews. They're just like locking her up behind the door going, oh, well, we're having scheduling conflicts. We don't know what to do. She's just so busy. You're busy for the #1 podcast in the world? That's an insane thing to say. But you have time for... She doesn't even have time to go to these disaster zones. East Palestine, Ohio. What took place with Helene over there on the East Coast. She's that, What is she doing? Like, I really do mean this. I don't know what she's doing. She doesn't do interviews all that often. She doesn't talk to Joe Biden all that often, even though we're told that she does. Like, what does she actually do? What is her job? You're too busy to go on the #1 podcast in the world? That shit doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make any sense at all. I know it doesn't to any of you.